So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Untold Stories of World War I AFS Drivers with lecturer Lisa Ann Britton of UPenn. My name is Nikki Levinson Angulo, and I work at AFS International. AFS International is the leadership body that helps run the big, wonderful network that is AFS. And if you're just joining us, I invite you to, in the chat, share where you're joining from. I see people from Ecuador to Norway to Prague. So it's a very international audience, which is amazing. And let us know, what is your connection to AFS? Are you an alum? Are you a volunteer? I see some of my fellow staff members. Hi, Milton, in Costa Rica. So we're really excited to have Lisa from UPenn joining us, and she's going to spend most of the time today talking. But just in case you don't know that much about AFS, I wanted to do a quick refresher. So AFS comes out of the world wars, and we're going to be talking, Lisa's going to be sharing some amazing stories and findings about our World War I history. But we participated in World War I and in World War II. And after World War II, the young gentleman that you see here, Stephen Galati, said, okay, how do we never have World War III? What could AFS do to stop future world wars? And the thought was, let's create programs for young people that build friendships across borders. So if you're an AFS and alumni on this call, maybe this picture makes your heart feel happy, right? This is participants from 1973. And these are our participants today. We are still going very, very strong. And I just want to tell you a little bit, if maybe you haven't connected with AFS in a while, or maybe you don't know how big we are, we actually operate today in 137 countries. We have 56 network organizations. I saw someone's eyebrows go up, which makes me happy. Yes, we run programs in 137 countries. We have 56 organizations, AFS offices. We have more than 35,000 volunteers were the heart of AFS in World War I and World War II, and they are still the beating heart of AFS today. We work with 25,000 schools to host students and do educational programming. And we have 500,000 alumni of our programs. And I hope many of you on the call today are some of those alumni. And some of them everyone who's an AFS alumni is super cool, no matter what you do. We all do little things to make the world a better place. But we do have some pretty cool famous people in our alumni. We have astronauts. We have Christine Lagarde, Gabriel Boric, the youngest president in the history of Chile, who just left his role or completed his term. So some really cool alums. And when we talk about our work today at AFS, we say the world needs more active global citizens, and AFS helps create them. So what do we mean when we say active global citizen? AFS actually has a very specific definition of that I want to share with you. We're talking about people whose informed, compassionate, and ethical compass drives them to lead lives and make decisions that contribute to a more just, equitable, peaceful, and sustainable world. And Lisa is going to talk to you about two young people who served as ambulance drivers during World War I, who absolutely fit that definition that we use today, even though they were volunteers for AFS well over 100 years ago. Before I introduce Lisa, just in case you don't stay to the very end of this call, I do want to let you know that there are ways that you can stay involved with AFS. And again, I think many of you are still very involved. We invite you to consider volunteering for AFS, to become a host family. Host families are critical to our mission, and we always need more. To explore our programs for people of all ages. We're very famous for high school programs, but we do so much more than that. We do plenty of things for adult learners and young people who are just starting their career, and consider making a donation to the part of AFS that matters to you most. So super quick recap, setting the stage for Lisa. AFS in World War I. How many of you, show me you can use your real human hand, you can use an emoji, you can use whatever. How many of you feel like you really know a lot about AFS during World War I? Okay, I see Tamara, I see some hands going up. Okay, in case you don't, you're gonna learn a lot more from Lisa today. But we started as the Volunteer American Ambulance Field Service, later known as the American Field Service, because the first name was a mouthful, and then later AFS. And this started right after the outbreak of World War I in 1914. 2,500 volunteers participated in every major French battle, and also served on the Balkan front. And they carried supplies and more than 500,000 casualties. And Lisa is going to read some pretty harrowing te I don't know, testimonials of young men who experienced what it was like to carry those casualties. And we'll be able to imagine what that experience must have been like for them. And that brings me to Lisa, the best part of this. So Lisa, thank you, Lisa, for being with us today, is a lecturer of foreign languages at UPenn. She designs an intermediate level course that teaches French language and culture through the art of storytelling, which I think is super cool. And this semester, Lisa's teaching a new Penn Global course that uses object-based learning, including objects from the AFS archives, to engage students in the history and culture of World War I in France. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Lisa is going to take us on her journey, right? As someone who sort of discovered AFS and then dug deeper and deeper. And she's going to share the stories of two pretty amazing individuals with us who were AFS drivers. But I think most interesting for me is she is going to share how she's transmitting that story to young people today at the University of Pennsylvania and beyond. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, am I showing okay?
Looking great.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Nikki for this opportunity. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'm so grateful to AFS, to Daniel, and to Nikki for this opportunity to gather today with you. This project is the culmination of a several-year period of research in New York City and in France. So it was an international initiative, and it's really a special moment for me to be here to share this with you. This is a project that I hold very close to my heart. And so the story I'm going to tell you today is this really remarkable story about two young men, two ambulance drivers, James Gailey and Pearlie Hamilton, and how my pursuit of their story has brought together these communities at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, over in France on the Chemin des Dames, on two sides of the ocean. And so I'd like to give you the perspective, not of a historian per se, but from the perspective of a French language and culture lecturer who's always has her ear to the ground for a good story that will inspire my students who are thinking about going out into the world. And so I thought I'd begin with a brief orientation to the place where the story unfolds. It's the Chemin des Dames. And I thought it would be fitting, given our audience, to hand the mic over to one of the AFS drivers from Section 65, who was sectioned over there on the Chemin des Dames, and I wanted him to take the wheel to get us started. This description is from the AFS Bulletin, which was a weekly publication that circulated among the different sections throughout France along the front line, and this one is from 1917. And our driver writes, "Esteemed editor of the Bulletin, when we wrote to you last time, I could not tell you where we were because it was a great military secret. Now we are coming on repos, and I'm writing to tell you. We were at the Chemin des Dames. Chemin des Dames means road of ladies, but it ain't no road for ladies now, unless it has been repaired recently since we last saw it. It used to go east and west on a big plateau, but the authorities aren't quite sure where it is now, seeing as how it got scattered all over the plateau this summer. Parts of it used to hit our ambulances very often. You don't need any arc lights to see your way around there because they've got lots of star shells, i.e. bombs, artillery fire hanging over it. But you have to look out for the places where the bush, not so nice term for the German, trenches cross the road." Today, if you were to visit the Chemin des Dames, and just to give you a bit more context, the Chemin is a 30-kilometer road, so it's about 19 miles in the northern part of France, northeastern, about about an hour and a half outside of Paris by car. You could easily identify it today by the two blue lines that bordered the length of the road, unlike in 1917. And you will know for sure that you are traveling along the Chemin des Dames, and even at night, you can see the blue lines. One of the questions that comes up with the ladies of the road, the chemin des dames, who are these ladies? What does the name refer to? And they are Adelaide and Victoire, who were both princesses, the daughters of Louis XV, who in 1784 made their way along the plateau to visit Adelaide's lady in waiting. At least that's the story that's told. It's somewhat legendary because they only did travel it once. But in their honor, and because of who they were, they had the road paved. And so today, if you're traveling along the Chemin des Dames and you have a good guide, you can still see traces of the stones, the original stones that were laid for them. But the rest of the road you'll see is more modern. In more modern memory, the Chemin des Dames is remembered as one of the main stages for the theater of the Great War from 1914 to 1918. The plateau had a tremendous strategic value. And so it was part of the Western Front. It changed hands several times between the French and the German. It was highly disputed and most remembered, perhaps even forgotten, I would say, because it was the site of the failure of the Nivelle Offensive in 1917, which was one of the great military debacles of the war, which also sparked mutinies in the area. And so it is a place that was declared, as you can see by this postcard that came out around 1920, it was declared a red zone after the war, and some of the villages actually disappeared um, from the maps because they were no longer inhabitable. The landscape you see here, I think, really recalls that first description we saw from our AFS driver. You can only imagine the difficulty that they had driving because they drove at night over these shelled roads with no lights while they were being bombed and gassed and transporting these wounded from the dressing stations to the local hospitals. So this picture, I think, really is haunting in many ways. When I first traveled to Chemin des Dames, it was in 2018, and my guide told me something very that I've never forgotten. He said, this ground is still spitting up the war. These objects from the Great War, including human remains, they're still being discovered today. In fact, when I first went there, they had discovered skeletons of a Senegalese and a French soldier, and the skeletons were intertwined. So it gives you a sense of the the cultural intersections of the place and the sense of that the spirit of the war and the tragedy of the war is relentless. It's still rising to the surface. And along with the objects, along with these tragic remains, you also have these stories that continually emerge, new stories um, of old stories, really. And so this picture that you see here is the Constellation de la Douleur. It's a memorial by the artist Christian Lepie, who you see here. And this is a memorial that commemorates the Senegalese fighters that fought in the Neville Offensive, the colonial fighters. And for me, it really expresses this pull that this place has. It invites you in, it asks you to engage, to go deep, to explore physically and emotionally with this place. And so when I first came upon this, I thought this place is just extraordinary in so many ways. To confirm this uh, site of commemoration, this pilgrim place where people from all over the world come, not only to remember family members, but their own community's engagement in World War I. UNESCO recently in 2023 it gave certain sites along the Chemin des Dames inscription as World Heritage Sites. And so it's really has come to the forefront, right, of a place of pilgrimage, of commemoration. And so the story that I'm going to tell you today is along those same lines. But I wanted to pause here for a minute and see, Nick, if you wanted to add anything or if...
No, I think this is a great introduction, Lisa, to sort of set the stage for the discoveries that you made when you actually went to this area, and sort of started diving really deep into these two amazing, very human, very individual stories, right? And what I love about what you're going to share is this was so long ago, but it was also like a second ago, right? Like when you think about the state of the world today, how chaotic everything is, what do you do as an individual human in that kind of a moment? Yeah, so thank you for painting such a picture of the physical space.
From UNESCO, and one of the missions of UNESCO is to really remember the individual, and so this idea of each individual has their site, their marker. And so I think that this story falls into that same mission, right? To give a place to remember both Hamilton and Gailey. So Act One is excavation, this deep dive into the story of AFS. And my deep dive, oops, I'm gonna go back one, starts, sorry. Ah, hang on a sec. I'm getting ahead of myself. My deep dive starts in Froidmont Quarry, which is an underground quarry along the Chemin des Dames. The gentleman you see on the left is Gilles Chauvin, and he is the gatekeeper of the quarry that was inhabited. It was a refuge for American soldiers in 1918. But he's also the keeper of all the oral stories from the region, and he has this just absolute devotion to the American presence on the Chemin des Dames, which, doesn't play a major role. We're a secondary role. It's not Normandy Beach. And so, but he is there, so devoted. And when I met him, he took me underground, and as you can see, his approach is to have a photo next to the engraving of these soldiers. And so he really places so much importance on putting a face to the story, putting a name to their work. And as we were leaving, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, and there's another story that's not here, but about an AFS driver uh, from the US who had died on what they call Dead Man's Curve on the Chemin des Dames." And I thought, I had never heard of AFS. I had no idea that there had been American university students driving ambulances on the Chemin des Dames. And I thought, from the perspective of a lecturer who is working with young adults from the universities, that this was actually the way in, maybe for some students, to have them see themselves kind of reflected in these stories that are from so long ago, right? And sometimes it's really difficult to get young people to engage with history that seems maybe not as relevant to them. And so my pursuit of AFS led me to Blérancourt, because this this is the castle that belonged to Anne Morgan. It was given to Anne Morgan to do, daughter of J.P. Morgan, to do humanitarian aid. But it's also the site of the AFS archives in France, and it's just on the outskirts of the Chemin des Dames region. It's a spectacular place, quite unusual for archives, because they also have an original model of the ambulance from the sanitary section number 30, which was one of the ambulances that was serving on the Chemin des Dames. And so, I mean, it's quite impressive when you walk into the museum to see this. You are just immediately uh, transported, like you're driven, should I say, if I use the pun, to the past. And so I spoke with the conservator there at the museum and said, help me find students from Philadelphia. Can you help me find University of Pennsylvania students who may have served on the Chemin des Dames? Because I thought this would be an amazing way to connect students with the region. And so we spent the day going through one of the original a volunteer list. It's a tremendously large book. As you can see from the photos, we just went through every single name. Where were they from? Were they from Philadelphia or the region? Were they from the University of Pennsylvania? Came up with quite a few names. But what was surprising is that we came up with two names of students who were on the Chemin des Dames, who in parentheses, it was listed killed as volunteer. And these were two young men who were, in addition to Paul Cody Bentley, who we had already heard about, and whose death had already been documented in the area. And so on the way out, of the museum, you can see this beautiful tableau that was created to commemorate 12 of the young men who had died at the time when the American Field Service when the U.S. was not officially engaged in the war. And so these are non-combatants, they were volunteers. This was before AFS was militarized later in 1917. And this tragic list of names of these young men. And lo and behold, we had Paul Cody Bentley, who we knew was from Harvard, and it indicates Chemin des Dames. And you also had Pearlie Raymond Hamilton, killed by shell near the Chemin des Dames, buried in the military cemetery at Beaurieux, which is the village just below the Chemin des Dames, given the Croix de Guerre from the Ninth Army Corps, and James Wilson Gailey, sorry, from Princeton, killed the same date as Raymond Hamilton. And so the pursuit began. I went home that night and began to read the story of sections. They were in section 66, um, which served the village of Vassonia. I'm gonna pause here for a minute just to check in.
You're doing great. This is Nikki. I realize, like, I think I pinned you, so I'm probably a disembodied voice for post people, but just want to share in the chat what a wonderful mix of people we have here. And we actually have the descendant. I think there's at least two people who have an actual relationship back to an ambulance driver. So it's really, especially, and there are not many surviving drivers left. So having the descendants of those drivers in this call with us today is particularly special. And I hope for them and also for those of you who were participants, right, and maybe don't know quite as much about the young people who served in the world wars, that what Lisa describes next, we're going to meet two people will really connect with you and resonate with you. What I always think is crazy is, like, AFS students today are teenagers, and I'm a mom. I hope I don't look as old as I am, but I am a mom. And so, like, when you show the photos of the two people that you're going to talk about, to me, they're all babies, right? These are kids, right? These are not much older than our AFS participants today. Or if you're an AFS alumni dialing in, the young men we're going to learn about were not much older than you were when you went on your program. And when you think about young people doing what they did, it's just so, so moving. So thank you, Lisa. Feel free to keep going.
Yeah, so maybe just to pick up on that, I think it's an emotional experience, right? To be a lecturer at a university of young people, and to look out in the face of, your classroom and see reflected back to you this story, right? Of Jim Gailey and Pearlie Hamilton, two young men full of life, ready to engage and ready to serve. And the backgrounds of these two young men, you know, um, makes us reflect on the choice that they made, right? This decision. And I think when I tell my students about the story of Gailey and Hamilton, they say, well, why would they do that? Why would they leave their cushy life at the university to go serve in France? And it's that big question. And I think it points to the value of service and also the relationship that we had with France at the time. That as you saw from the previous tableau, which was Washington and Lafayette, and these deep roots of historical friendships that date back, right? And that are strong bonds that called them to serve. And so, if you read the history of the American Field Service, you can read about the different sections and where they traveled and where they served, and the different, I would say, misadventures. Some of them hilarious. I mean, they're wonderful writers, as you saw from the description in the beginning. They have a very American kind of style of how they tell their stories. And some of them are absolutely hilarious. A lot of them point to kind of quirky cultural encounters that they have. And then others tell these harrowing stories. But all of them are, there's this deep thread of service, right? And doing something good in the world, doing something good with their life. And so, as George Condell said, we didn't come for money or for fun. We came as volunteers to do what good we could. And that's at the end of section 66, the history of it. Our first young ambulance driver is James Wilson Gailey, also known as Jim. He's born in New Park, Pennsylvania, which is not too far, maybe an hour outside of Philadelphia. He joined the American Field Service in May of 1917, received the Croix de Guerre, and he was an only child. And so it's been difficult to track down a lot of information about him. But what we do know, thanks to Princeton, is that he was a particularly good student. It's difficult to tell here because the way they scored and the way they graded at the time. Um, but what we do know about him is that he did know French. He did know some French, and that's a common theme among some of the some of the drivers that we read about. They would test out their French as best they could while they were engaging with the different with the population. But most tragically, I think in this report card you'll see is on the lower right-hand side. He left before the end of his term to serve on the Chemin des Dames for the AFS, and you'll see noted American Field Service, killed on the front July 28th, 1917. And so, left his desk at Princeton, paid his way, paid his equipment, paid for his travel over to France, and tragically died. But Princeton did grant him an honorary degree. What we do know about Jim Gailey is that he was quite beloved. His mother, the friends that knew him asked if they could publish and she could share some of the letters that he had written to her. And so she did do a limited kind of publication of his letters, which is still available at the Princeton Archives and at the Blair Archives. But his letters are absolutely stunning. And one of the themes you read a lot, and especially with these ambulance drivers, is their desire to get to the front. They leave and they're so eager to see. They go through a period of training where they're learning how to drive these Ford T ambulances that have been kind of remade to serve at the front, and they're just so impatient to get there. They want to see the action. And then, as they make their way closer to the front, they start to see the reality of war. And it's such a moment of, this rite of passage into adulthood where they start to see really realities that are traumatic for these young individuals. And still they persist and are so devoted to their work. And so this letter, I think, is just such a tragic ending. And I'll read this part. He says, "And now I will tell you the worst thing I've had to go through in my life. I was carrying badly wounded men down from the front in the middle of the night, and all the way, every one of them yelling. I knew the road was rough, but I couldn't go any slower. They yelled and they beat on the partition between me and them. Whenever I took the slightest bump, I felt rather guilty, but I did my best. Um, his co-pilot, Pearlie Raymond Hamilton, is from Clinton and joined the AFS on June 9th, 1917. The way that it worked when they were driving is that somebody would take the wheel because they were called out night usually. They had to drive without lights and oftentimes through fog, through maybe gas. So they were oftentimes wearing gas masks. Pearlie Raymond Hamilton had asthma, so that was one of the other uh, challenges for these young men. And so one was driving, one was taking the road, kind of knew the ways to get to the dressing station, and the other one would light the road when necessary with a little torch, with the torch lamp to get them through. But meantime, they're being shelled um, by the Germans. Recently, I made my way to Clinton, Massachusetts, to see what I could find about Pearlie. And oh, they actually called him Ham. So I should say Ham actually had a sister, and so his great niece is still alive today. And the wonderful surprise about Pearlie Raymond Hamilton is that he's the local hero of Clinton, Massachusetts. And by the train station, there is a square, Hamilton Square, named in his honor, and also a treasure trove of photographs. This one, I think, being particularly precious because it shows us that prior to leaving, Pearlie Raymond Hamilton had access to a car and he knew how to drive. And actually, a lot of the people that talk about Ham say, oh, what a great driver he was. We also have uh, Ham's diary. And so I thought I would share with you the very last entry. Um, thing that's somewhat remarkable for Section 66 is that they served, like I said, the village of Vassonia, which was just below the Chemin des Dames, just below the plateau on the way down into the valley. And they were there not several weeks until these young men, these ambulance drivers, this section, found themselves in the middle of one of the most ferocious battles of the Chemin des Dames in 1917, which was somewhat unusual for a section to be kind of just placed right down in the middle of this like highly active part of the front. And so Ham says, last night we slept at Beaulieu. That's where they were stationed, that's where the section was stationed. The moon was clear and the aviators were busy over our head. Last night being the first night since arriving here that I've slept in an abri. Sometimes they would sleep in their ambulances. The bombardment continues heavily along our front, and we have held consistently. Tonight, I'm on duty at the various posts, many wounded nowadays. And so, as you read Ham's diary, he's very aware of the activity. And at one point, he says, we are in the midst of the great battle of the Chemin. They will call this the battle of the Chemin des Dames. And he wasn't wrong. And so, it points suggests to us that, they knew they were in harm's way. They were in a dangerous, precarious situation. And what this diary doesn't tell you is that just before this, they were doing 48-hour shifts, going back and forth, transporting wounded, and all wounded of all nationalities, right? So it was not limited to just French wounded. There were also the colonial troops they would transport Germans. So it made no distinction between friend or enemy. They were transporting the wounded that came to the dressing station. So the tragic day in Vassonia, July 29th, 1917, told by the captain or the chef of the sanitary section 66, on the morning of the 29th came the death of Gailey and Hamilton as they were doing their duty with the care, coolness, and dependability that had distinguished the conduct of every driver. Gailey and Hamilton aren't exceptional. Um, this was something that AFS had this reputation. These drivers, they knew the French army wanted these American drivers because they were so good at what they did. Um, and so when they did, well, let me go back for a second because I wanted to share with you um, just a small detail is that what is somewhat extraordinary is that their ambulance was hit by a shell while Hamilton was at the wheel, and so he died immediately. But Gailey was loading the wounded into the back of the ambulance, and so he didn't die immediately. He went back to the dressing station for help, and that's where he passed. And so it was quite a dramatic and like horrific story when the other members of the section discovered him. So extraordinary and so remarkable that at the funeral, General Nissel, who was in charge of the Corps at the time, it came and gave the farewell speech for Hamilton and Gailey. And you can read this in the history of the American Field Service. It's such a moving farewell, but said, after 3 years of fighting, our troops know how to gauge true courage. And they, all of them, say that you are, as I know you to be, brave men. Um, and so as he was saying this, he laid the Croix de Guerre on the tombs of on the caskets of Hamilton and Gailey. And we also know that A. Piatt Andrew, who was the founder of AFS, was also present. So it shows you the impact of this event, right? How important it was for them to be there to remember Gailey and Hamilton. Now, today, if you are in the area, you can visit the American Cemetery at Seringenel. It's about an hour's drive from the Chemin des Dames. It's an extraordinary place, very sacred, where James Wilson Gailey and Pearlie Raymond Hamilton are buried side by side. We know from my visit this past summer that although it states in the history and in the commemorative volume of the American Field Service that Pearlie was not sent, his body was not sent home, that he lies at rest at the cemetery as well. But it's such a remarkable place to visit. So I'm going to take a pause there for a second before we talk about transmission.
No, thank you so much, Lisa. And like, I tear up when, even though I know what's going to happen, unfortunately, to Gailey and Hamilton, and you and I have talked about this a lot, I still tear up hearing their stories. And I'm excited to hear this last part where you're really going to share how you're connecting the stories of these two individuals to the experience of young people today in a college classroom, right? And in many ways, you are teaching a lesson that is extremely important and dear to the mission of AFS and the work that we try to do through our exchange programs. So excited to hear this next piece too. And I just want to do a time check. We're at
Mhm.
12:40. So I would say I
Gotcha.
want to try and make sure we have about 10 minutes for questions if we
Will
can
do.
possibly.
Okay. So onward. So transmission. How do we share the story? So our first move was to think about the Chemin des Dames community. I engaged the heritage specialist from the region, Guy Marival, and together we decided we would publish two articles in the local Carnet du Chemin des Dames, which is read not only by visitors who come to the Chemin des Dames to commemorate, but also is part of it's one of the historical documents that's circulated throughout the community to tell them about Gailey and Hamilton, but also about the American Field Service and one of the ambulance poets that came out of the sections on the Chemin des Dames. Next up was a project of very long term, but this is the Penn Global Studies course that I'm teaching at the University of Pennsylvania this semester. There's two components. There's a component that happens for 15 weeks in Philadelphia. And then at the end of the course, the students will travel to the site that they're studying to explore these historical sites and commemorative sites in person. So it's a really exciting opportunity for me, for them, and for these two communities to connect us. Um, Caves, Cathedrals, and Curiosities is the name of the course. It's an object-based learning course. And so the idea is to use objects to help students make that passage to the past and to engage really in a more embodied way with the history of the place, the culture, and the story that these objects tell. And so for me, the American Field Service is perhaps the story par excellence to do this, to share with them not only Penn's heritage, but Philadelphia's heritage, Pennsylvania's heritage, the US heritage, with the stories that are happening and being told on the Chemin des Dames. And so I'm so delighted to be able to. I believe, Nikki, we're talking about a full uniform of one of the drivers. Gasmax, you have an Adrian casque on the left, which is the French helmet that was used, but was also worn by AFS drivers. And in the middle, a line a day, is the diary by Louis G. Caldwell, who was one of the sous chefs of the Section 65 that you saw. And that's his personal diary of being on the Chemin des Dames. So students will have an opportunity to study these and to really explore the stories of Hamilton and Gailey and AFS in depth. But why? And I think this points to maybe I should say a crossroads in language and culture learning. This question of how does a French language and culture class um, understand its role today with the onset of AI, the ability to kind of learn grammar um, uh, outside of the classroom? I think we have an opportunity to think about engaging students meaningfully, um, cultivating their curiosity and empathy. These are objectives that really lean themselves to significant learning experiences, experiences that students will remember once they finish their studies at the university and they go on to do other professions. We want them to remember these moments, to remember these stories. Also, one of our objectives, and this is an objective of Penn Global Studies, is to foster this prismatic understanding of people's cultures and ideas. This idea that, look through this prism and see this multifaceted place and people. And so I just find that to be just a wonderful metaphor. And then to understand that global perspective is necessary to do good in the world. This is right from Ben Franklin, the founder of the University of Pennsylvania. This idea that it's not enough just to study and to do studies at the university, but his challenge, I think, to us is to think what good will we do in the world? And so when I think about the objectives that I have for my students in the classroom, and I think about AFS, there's just this beautiful alignment, this beautiful intersection. And this was not intended, this color coding. And I know Nikki will attest to this, but this prismatic color that comes out, value and belonging. How do you find yourself in a place that's outside of where you grew up, right? To explore the world beyond you, to inquire critically about history and people and places and our own role in the world, right? To understand and to relate. That's the whole point of taking a foreign language, to be able to relate and connect. And then also to take action, right? To not be passive learners, but to be engaged with the history and with the stories. And so for me, this story of Gailey and Hamilton has so many, if I can use this chemin des dames, it invites us to dig deep in the way we learn, in the way we connect with each other in the classroom, and also in the way that we connect with the world outside. So I'm going to move on to commemoration, if that's okay with you.
Go
Uh,
for it.
this last final act is our final act where we think about maybe the the final objective, the purpose of bringing these different separate communities together through commemoration. It's a place of commemoration. And to me, it's kind of a natural end or maybe beginning to this story. And so this has been in the works in collaboration with the American Field, I should say, AFS Intercultural, um, uh, the modern AFS, with communities over in the Chemin des Dames um, to think about how we could commemorate the story. And so I thought of Christian Lepie, who I correspond with regularly since that first moment when I encountered his installation, to tell him about this story, share with him the story about Gailey and Hamilton, and see if he would be interested in maybe helping us to commemorate. You'll see on the right-hand side one of his most recent exhibits, which is outside of Paris, but he has this extraordinary ability to understand space and art and how it invites us to engage and connect. And when Mr. Lepie heard the story of Gailey and Hamilton, um, he, like many who hear the story, was deeply moved by it. And so after I met with him, he contacted me and one of the historians that I'm working with and said, okay, let's go to the site and see um, and kind of rediscover the story. That's his practice of how he envisions commemoration. And so we were able, with the help of Guy Marival, the mayor of Vassogne, and also with the museum founder in Vassogne, to identify the actual location of uh, the the dressing station in Vassogne, which you'll see in the middle, but it's hidden by this long trail through this slightly wooded area, but it leads to this out clearing. And so this is kind of the process of Mr. Lepie, is to kind of go and return to the site and to consider the story. And he has such an eloquent way of understanding this commemoration process that I wanted to share with you. In 1917, rather than joining the combat ranks, Gailey and Hamilton chose to serve as ambulance drivers on the European front. They willingly risked their lives to rescue the wounded, regardless of nationality. This choice, motivated by profound humanity, was also a deeply personal commitment. And so the idea about this uh, commemorative installation is to commemorate Gailey and Hamilton, certainly at the start, but to also think of the all the members of AFS who were committed to this idea of service. Um, and you'll see the rendering that Mr. Lepie sent. I think it was shortly after we had visited the site. This idea that it's an opportunity to commemorate Gailey and Hamilton, the AFS drivers who were in France, the spirit of friendship, the spirit of international connection, and to bring these communities together to remember these stories that are so transformative and that really are at the core of the values that we cherish.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was awesome. Everybody, you can use your real hands or you can use your Zoom hands to give Lisa a round of applause. And Lisa, I'm gonna unspotlight you and just sort of
Thank
share the
you.
screen. Um, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. I'll also share a few links in the chat that maybe respond to some answers. One thing I want to give Lisa a break with. Lisa has done tremendous research into these particular stories. AFS has a much larger history, which you may not be an expert on, sort of that has to, in the broader World War One. I can give it my very best shot to answer some of those history questions, but cannot promise I will be right. But I see Nicole Ferrari. I see your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, Lisa, actually have a question about the artist Christian Lapie. His sculptures are haunting. Those big, tall, thin images of, and I was wondering, for the commemoration, it looks like the plans are a really long tree trunk, and then on top, those beautiful, haunting, tall, skinny statues. And I was wondering if you could explain that imagery and why did he make that choice for that particular commemoration, or if you know
Uh,
it, if he.
I can. I also think that's something we can reveal, and Nikki, we can talk about this over time to like how the artist. I don't want to unveil everything, but I will tell you that the tree, if you can remember back some of the earlier slides of the Chemin des Dames post-war, this figure of the truncated tree is a very a familiar image during World War One, the landscape, no man's land, and so I think it harkens back to that. But also the way, and I wouldn't want to speak for Christian Lepie because he's such an eloquent writer, but he imagines, I think, this idea of the tree being the youth, a life cut short too soon. And so he gives very deep thought into this. I think the installation still today is entitled L'Arbre, which in French means tree. And so he pulls in a lot of different imagery from not just World War One, but this idea of youth and like the vigor of life being cut short. So.
And Lisa, I was so excited to get to questions and answers that I forgot to say what I was supposed to say, which is
Oh
that
yeah.
Lisa and the artist Christian Lepie are working closely with AFS International. And so this we're in the very early stages of seeing what will this memorial look like. And AFS International is going to be part of cultivating support for taking this from an artist rendering to a real memorial in France. So I just shared in the chat many links. Some of you have links about, is there a full roster of World War I drivers? I shared a link to our archives. We actually have a lot of our archives available online. But also, please make sure if you do nothing else, you sign up for our newsletter, AFS Now, if you're interested in this memorial and how it is going to unfold and become real. Please sign up for our newsletter and we'll be sharing more about that. And we're really excited about this. It's very cool. And it's still in the works. And again, Lisa's working carefully with AFS International to bring this from paper to reality. I know we had a question in the chat.
Yes.
Melissa Nettlecut, feel free to ask.
Hi. Wow, you said the name right. Awesome.
Oh,
Leave
cool.
it to an AFSer who knows
Yeah.
international names. So I just had a question. I'm an alumni from, I did exchange in Belgium. And this sounds like it would have been really, really close by to where I lived in Belgium that year in Charleroi. So Nivelles sounds familiar. I know that was a town nearby. So anyway, I was just wondering, like, is there engagement on behalf of AFS France and Belgium to get the students that are actually on exchange in the area there to go to these sites? As like AFS Belgium was amazing as far as doing like events for the alumni there, because they're such a small country. It was really easy to get everyone gathered together just because geographically we were close. So I was just thinking that would have been an amazing thing for us as AFSers to go on a day trip, to see like the museum, the archives at Barieux, and see
Mhm.
those things. Borieux, I guess that's what she said. Anyway, I didn't even know about this stuff when I was there, and I could have. I mean, my host family would have gladly taken me. My host mom was also an AFSer to the U.S. So, I mean, that would have been an amazing pilgrimage for an AFS family to make if they are in the north, eastern France or any part of Belgium. I'm just trying to like I'm so hyped up right now about this. I'm ready to go to Belgium and go to France and see all this stuff. I mean, I joined AFS. I chose AFS because of its history. And so this would have been just amazing. And I'm sure that there are other AFSers out there that when they research doing an exchange, they choose AFS for their mission. And so, and I was one of those. So I'm just thinking like we should we should get this going for the people even in Britain, like all the people in that area that could do that as a day trip. I mean, it should be like top of the list for AFSers as part of our own history, as AFS alums.
Well, thank
I
you
just
so much,
wanted,
Melissa. Thank you, first of all, for being here. Also, thank you for the enthusiasm. I'm so happy to hear that this struck a chord with you. And, we do have excellent and very active. AFS France is one of our biggest partners in terms of the number of participants that they have. AFS Belgium isn't always not only a big partner, they are one of the partners in our network that does the most to engage their participants in active global citizenship, like helping people that
yes,
are migrants adjust to Europe. I actually don't know how much they do on the ground to connect participants to their history. I know that their volunteers definitely do, but I love your idea, and I think you'll be very excited to know Lisa and I and some other staff at AFS International are talking about could we do something after she has this class that she's going to be doing this spring? Could we actually plan some sort of an in-person trip activity that's open to alumni, to the descendants of drivers, and also to our own participants where they could experience everything that Lisa described in real life. So I love your idea. I think you're 100% right. There are some AFS staff people on this call who I'm sure are like, that's a really good idea. We could do more with that.
Hey,
So yeah, thank you for sharing that, and most of all, just for your
Nikki,
enthusiasm for being here.
allow me to say something quickly.
Sure, Luke.
I'm
Thank you,
from
Luke, for being
Belgium.
so active in the chat. You've been an amazing participant.
I'm
Go for
from
it.
Belgium. My daughter actually was, how you call it, president of, together with another, she also went with AFS.
Great.
She went to Ecuador. I went to Redmond, Oregon in the States. But I will pass on this message that they should maybe trigger something extra in the year planning around this. There is actually a very interesting museum called In Flanders Fields,
yes,
which is an amazing experience to do. Another artist that you might look into is an artist called Berlinde de Bruikere, and she made one of the most shocking art installations I've seen in my life. She took photos of the First World War after a bombardment where horses were thrown into trees, and she made this into a sculpture with actual real dead horses that were put in an installation. It blew me away.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that, Luke. And thank you to your daughters for, it sounds like you're from an AFS family, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to put that name in the chat because as much as my
Berlinde de
US
Bruikere.
yeah, I know you're saying it clearly, but I bet you people like me could use help with the spelling so they can
Okay.
Google it.
I will
Agreed. Thank you, Luke.
I will quickly put in the link.
Can,
Awesome.
can
Yeah,
I
Lisa,
also
go for it.
just like pop in and say, I think that's one of the really exciting opportunities that this story, it keeps giving and stretching us to think about how to represent this story, like how to transfer it. And so as a language and culture teacher, it's like starting from zero. How do we build a curriculum around this story? Where are the places that we need to go? And so, the first part is obviously, identifying the locations, building a map, building an itinerary, but also pulling in these original letters, these original diary entries, so that it really becomes this very comprehensive, like prismatic story that we want to share and actually design a real curriculum around it because it's so powerful and it's right there available to us.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'm going to share just before we wrap up for the day because we're at time. I'm going to just very quickly share One more time for everybody, a reminder just about ways that you can stay in touch with us. Again, many of you, believe me, will be following up with you. I'm going to email you, send you a recording. Lisa, I want to let people know, if there's a way that they can also keep in touch, maybe with your class, right? And see how that's going. But I just want to remind you, if you want to connect more deeply with AFS, be more involved, if you're not already doing so, please think about becoming a volunteer. We have one person who's thinking about being a host family. That's amazing. Explore programs. We have amazing virtual options and in-person options for people of all ages, not just high school students, and consider making a donation to the part of AFS or the AFS organization that means the most to you. And please stay in touch. So if you know how QR codes work, this is a direct QR code to subscribe to our newsletter. And that's a great way to receive updates. And if you're interested in webinars like this in the future, we'll definitely be having not just virtual events, but we're going to try and do more with in-person events. So I want to enthusiastically thank Lisa. Lisa, you're awesome. I've heard you practice this, and yet I was still totally into
I
you
know
listening
we
to it.
did. I mean, it's the way it's the AFS kind of magic. Is like I can tell this story as many times as I told it, and I tell you, it's like it still holds so much power, and it's so inspirational. So thank you. I mean, thank you for this wonderful life discovery.
Thank you, Lisa. And I want to thank every single one of you for being here today. It was such a pleasure to meet you, to hear about your AFS stories. Please keep in touch. You'll have my email, right? So if there's ever anything you want to do, if you want to reach out, if you want to visit AFS International in New York, you're always welcome. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you on Zoom or somewhere else soon. Thank you so much. AFS forever. All right, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, everybody. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.